as we're waiting, I will put some Verdi, and then we can actually, I'll show you straight away this one we don't need. Okay, let me just share it again with the music. Okay, let's put some Verdi on with the BBC prom. Okay, so hello, I'm Mario Bernardi. We will start in another 5 minutes this virtual tour of the secrets of the Sistine Chapel. I'm just preparing some of the pictures now. I can just keep my screen shared, and this is it. And I'm prepared to open up the images that we're using. I will use a presentation just as a kind of backbone of the talk, but then of course we will be I will be using a 3D model, 360 3D model. We can navigate and have like the look and feel as if we were inside of the Sistine Chapel. And then again I will be showing you a number of details, things that you are normally not able to see when you are basically visiting the chapel physically, because of course you can't reach that level of details. We got this, we got everything. I think we need just a vault. Okay. All right, let's put a couple more minutes of music, and then we are ready to rock and roll. Let's get a bit Christmassy with the Gloria. Okay, so thank you for waiting. I think we can start. It's just the hour. If you have problems with the connection, or if you need help, please feel free to contact support that you find either on the Facebook page or in Zoom under the name Support the Grand Tour. If you have any question, you can ask them anytime. For the moment, the microphones are muted, but I will be unlocking them soon. But if you have like questions, you can put them in the chat. I'll be reading them during the talk or at the end of the talk, of course, if they are relevant. What we're looking at now, it's the digital model of the Sistine Chapel, which is can be found for free on the Musei Vaticani, on the Vatican Museum's official website, museivaticani.va. And of course, it doesn't come with a commentary, which I will be providing tonight. And this amazing digital copy allows us to enter and explore the Sistine Chapel free without any other visitors, and also to explore some parts that are usually not possible to visit, or some points of view that it's really hard to reach. Again, my name is Mario Bernardi of the Grand Tour. Welcome everyone, and I will be starting now. And tonight our story starts not from the main altar wall painted with the frescoes by Michelangelo, neither from the ceiling by Michelangelo as well, of which I'll be talking soon, but from the entrance wall, which is this one here. This large door leads to the Palazzo Apostolico, to the palace where actually the Pope lived or used to live, because the present Pope, the current Pope, lives in a different part of the Vatican. He has a 2-bedroom flat. It's a very small apartment where he lives in the house of Santa Marta. He doesn't use the big penthouse, just as an office or on very limited occasions. And anyway, our story today starts in 1980, about 40 years ago. There was a scaffolding on this wall. You could see that the Sistine Chapel is kind of divided in, the walls are divided into 3 different bands. There's the bottom part with this kind of painted curtains, and then episodes painted in the 1400s with episodes of the life of Jesus Christ on the right and episodes of the life of Moses on the left. And then, of course, there is the beautiful ceiling by Michelangelo and the Last Judgment there. So before we see this, how the Sistine Chapel came to be, where the names come from, what do they use it for today besides of tourism, and many other small secrets and elements in it. Let me just introduce you to this peculiar story, because in 1980 the Sistine Chapel looked very different. It was before the restoration. It was before 14 years cleanup was carried out to restore and clean the ceiling and the main altar, and eventually later on they also did the walls. But some restoration had to be done every now and then, because some parts had damages, some parts need to be cleaning. Especially this wall has always been quite weak because it was exposed and had some cracks and problems in the past. Imagine, you could see above the door here that the coat of arms of the Medici family, Pope Medici. There were 2 Pope Medici at the beginning of 1500s, Leo X, who was Giovanni de' Medici, the son of Lorenzo, the Lord of Florence, Lorenzo the Magnificent, and his cousin Giuliano della Rovere, who became Pope with the name of Clement VII. I'll talk about them again. Anyway, this wall actually, part of it cracked, and the part above the door just collapsed, nearly killing the Pope actually in the early 1500s. So this wall eventually had to be repainted, and was repainted by Jan van den Broek, a Dutch artist, and Matteo da Lecce, the one on the right, around in the 1570s, 1580s. So were made much later than the rest of the chapel. And these were quite damaged. So in 1980, there was a restoration. So imagine a scaffolding here. And let me just get on this. And this, of course, is a picture of the chapel. I'll be switching from a presentation to the website. This man here, his name is Gianluigi Colalucci, and he was the chief restorer of the Sistine Chapel from the late 1960s till the 1990s. So for about 30 years, he was the director of all the people who work in the restoration of the artifacts and the frescoes and the structure in the Vatican museums. He was trained in one of the specialized centers that we have in Italy for restorers. We have some of the best schools in the world about restoration of ancient artifacts and frescoes. And this man actually, he said in an interview that he was fascinated by the frescoes by Michelangelo in Sistine Chapel. When he was only 10 years old, one of his uncles took him to see the chapel, and he was kind of mesmerized by it. So he decided he wanted to do this or this life, and he was lucky in life to be able to live up to his dreams. The restoration was not scheduled. There was no plan or idea to restore the Sistine Chapel. But while he was up on the scaffolding on that wall I just showed you, he looked up and he saw that just above what he was cleaning at the moment, there was Michelangelo's fresco. They were there, and there was a thick level of grease, fat, dust, soot, and smoke, everything in there that made not possible to see through. These are pictures that show how the Sistine Chapel looked like before 1980, before the restoration was made. So what happened? It's that. Can you hear me? I think the sound. Do you think the sound is low? Hello, can you hear me now? Yes. So basically, it was dark. It was considered this kind of dark masterpiece by a man who was haunted by a number of theological issues and other moral and religious and theological questions, who was Michelangelo, as he was seen until the 1990s, early 2000s. So till about 20 years ago, the idea that art historians had of Michelangelo was very different. The Sistine Chapel always was considered a masterpiece, but a masterpiece of some kind of darkness, some kind of desperation that Michelangelo had of human beings being able to save themselves or being able to reconnect with God somehow. And this reflects also an idea that, especially in the 19th century, the historians of art had of the Catholic Church in the Renaissance and later on. So what Guallucci did, he saw this fresco, and actually he started with this one here, the fresco with El-Azhar. I show you, sorry for going in and out, but I wanted you to kind of immerse yourself and kind of see where we are here. We're just up here. So he was just restoring this part here. He just looked up and he said, let me get a ladder, let me go up there, let me restore this bit here. So as soon as he started to clean the figure of El-Azhar, is this one on the right, he originally just started with just a little napkin with a bit of saliva just scratching the wall. And then this patch came out, which was a completely different color. So he asked the permission to the director of the Vatican Museums at the time to clean just a sample. And he cleaned, the body of El-Azhar. And as soon as he finished that, he said, I was amazed. This beautiful blonde man emerged with this candid white shirt. It was amazing. It was glorious. I was about to cry and fall on my knees and just pray to that figure. It was so beautiful. Something completely unexpected. And Guallucci also wrote a book, which is also available in English, about his relation with Michelangelo, the 14 years he spent planning Michelangelo. Anyway, the director of the museums was very enthusiastic at the time. The Pope, who was Saint Paul II, basically said, oh, go ahead. He was very young at that time. He was a very energetic man. I remind you, he's the Polish Pope, was the first known Italian Pope since 1520. So it was a big change for the Catholic Church. Anyway, the fresco of El-Azhar proved that there was a different Michelangelo behind centuries of dirt and fat and varnish that had turned dark. And so basically the restoration went on, and it took, as I said, 14 years, and they cleared a little patch by patch. They left some darker patches to compare how it was before. There's been a huge opposition, and critics shouted at the fact that Michelangelo was being transformed, he was being betrayed. There are some elements that actually have changed. If you look, for example, in this, compare this is the prophet Daniel. On the ceiling on the sides, there are 7 prophets and 5 sibyls. The sibyls were prophecies of the pagans, of the Romans and the Greeks. So they symbolize the fact that the Christian church was able to put in accordance the Jewish heritage and tradition with the Greek and Roman philosophy, which is what then in the Renaissance had a big impulse again. Renaissance means rebirth. For rebirth, they meant rebirth of art and culture, the Roman Greek culture that was long lost or partially lost during the so-called Dark Ages. If you look at the picture on the left, you can see in the frames, these details have kind of been lost because Michelangelo did use for some of the shading the so-called nero fumo, black smoke. It was basically a candle, or with the dark of the burning of the candle, he was making some little shadings to add more depth to the fresco. And so some of them probably haven't survived. As you can see, there is more clear on the right, more bright, but also some of the shading has been lost. And so a number of artists, over 100, wrote a letter to the Pope and the Church. Oh, stop the cleaning, stop the restoration. What happened was that even artists like Andy Warhol signed up for this petition to ask the Pope to stop the restoration. But the church went ahead, and the result was amazing. Some details that were lost, like, for example, the face of this cherub at the back, emerged after hundreds of years. Sistine Chapel always had problems with the humidity, with the conservation. So since a very early stage, around 1540, 1550, there were constant cleanings and restorations that were carried out during the centuries, somehow changing the appearance, especially in the fact that they used some oil from nuts and from animal fats in order as a sealant to prevent yeast and to prevent any kind of changing in the color of the fresco, because of course there can be a number of things changing the color and growing on it, and the stucco. This is above the Last Judgment. The detail of Jonah, you can see how totally different it was before and after. They left a little patch to check how it could have been. And then this is the detail of the knee. As I said, some of the shading has somehow been lost. But let's go back the origin of the chapel. If we go on Google Earth or Google Maps or whatever this is, yes, Google, you can see this is the Vatican City-State, which is the smallest country in the world. Basically comprised is within these walls. These are the gardens where also the government's buildings. There is a pharmacy, the place where the Pope lives. Today it's here, the House of Santa Marta, a large meeting hall, also used as a concert hall. Of course, the Basilica of St. Peter, the largest basilica ever built, and St. Peter's Square, and next to it, the Vatican Museums. Right between the Vatican Museums and the Basilica of St. Peter, there is the Sistine Chapel, that from outside has quite kind of a military look. It looks like a fortress with this kind of walkways with the beccatelli, which are these little arches here at the bottom, the raised roof. The roof was rebuilt and re-raised at the second time because, of course, the vault is not right up to the top. It's kind of halfway, as I will show you shortly. And it's just between the palaces where the popes lived in the 1500s, where there are also the rooms of Raphael and a few other fresco rooms. And then, of course, the Palazzo Apostolico built in the 1500s, where this was the current apartment of the Pope, although, as I said, is not used by Pope Francis because he doesn't look like big penthouses, and he said he only lived on a very small apartment anyway all my life. Now we go back to the presentation, and you could see that the so this is the Sistine Chapel seen from the St. Peter's Dome, and the name of the chapel, it was named after Pope Sixtus the fourth that we see in this picture. Pope Sixtus was basically, let me just was basically Pope between 1470s and 1480s, and he was of the La Rovere family, a very powerful family. His coat of arms is somehow painted on the side of these columns with a blue background, is the oak tree. Rovere in Italian means oak tree. Now we can see the Pope here. This is a detached fresco that is now currently preserved inside the Vatican Museum in the painting gallery. The Vatican Museums consist of like 25 different museums, so there's tens of thousands of objects. If you were to spend 1 minute on every single work of art, which is in the Vatican Museums, you will need 50 days. I mean, using the 24 hours. So it's really a huge collection. And in the painting gallery area, there is also this fresco that was originally in the Vatican Library. This was made in 1475 by an artist called Melozzo da Forlì. And Melozzo painted the Pope in the act of appointing the very first librarian of the Vatican Library, which is one of the still operating today, one of the largest and most important libraries in the world, hosts some 3 million objects, about 2 million printed books, a few 100,000 medals, manuscripts, and other valuable documents. The man who was the first librarian is on his knees in the middle, is Bartolomeo Platina, a scholar of the 1400s. Standing in the middle, there is his nephew, the Pope's nephew, Giulio della Rovere, who later, Giuliano della Rovere, who later on would become Pope Julius II. He is the Pope who actually asked Michelangelo to paint the ceiling some 30 years later. Anyway, in 1478, there was an accident. The Pope, together with the king of the vice king of Naples and a few other Italian nobles, plot against the Medici. The Medici, the lords of Lorenzo Magnifico and the Medici family, they were bankers. They became extremely powerful, and they were ruling the city-state of Florence, which corresponded at that time more or less as half of Tuscany, with Lucca and Siena being independent, but most of like northern central part of Tuscany was like an independent city-state, raising in power because they were bankers. They were lending monies to all the European monarchs. So the Pope arranged for the Medici brothers, Lorenzo and his brother Giuliano, to be assassinated on Easter Sunday, 26th of April, 1478. There was a large and complex plot. It would take too long to explain it. But anyway, in the Duomo of Florence, during the Mass that was being celebrated by one of the nephews of the Pope, the Cardinal Riario, the Medici were stabbed. Giuliano died. Lorenzo survived. In this 19th century painting, we can see the dramatic scene. The people of Florence helped the Medici. Lorenzo was able to run and lock himself safe in the sacristy. And a war started with the Pope sending troops to Tuscany, with the King of Naples as well. They arrived to Chianti, and then it was the fall. So they decided to spend their few winter months. And of course, an army in the Chianti, you can imagine what the result was. Anyway, the next year, the Turks invaded southern Italy, and so the Pope started a crusade against the Turks. It was the Battle of Otranto, 1480. And in the same years, the Pope was rebuilding an old chapel, which was known as Cappella Magna, the large chapel. So the Sistine Chapel was being rebuilt, but there was no decoration yet. So from former enemies, because the Turks attacked Italy, all the Italian states decided to, band together in order to attack the Turks. The Ottoman Empire, which at that time was a raising power in Eastern Europe and in the Mediterranean, and dominated the Eastern Europe, Southern Eastern Europe, the Eastern Mediterranean Sea for about 400 years as an imperial power, to be clear. And basically what happened eventually, and by the way, later on in years, the Turks even invited Michelangelo to go to Istanbul and work for them. Michelangelo was about to accept, actually, because he wasn't very happy how things were going in Italy. Anyway, back to the Sistine Chapel. The Pope and Lorenzo Magnifico made a deal then. They made a peace. They said, okay, leave everything behind us. But as in exchange, the Pope wanted the greatest artist of Florence at the time to come to Rome and finish the chapel. Now, as I said, the chapel had a kind of a military look. You can see the cross section here on the right, where you have the central side. Yeah, it's true. The Medici series, it's on Netflix. I haven't watched it because I do tours at night, but yeah, that's on Netflix. Back to the and it looks really good, by the way. Anyway, to the cross section on the right, you can see that the chapel, the inside part of the chapel, is about 20 meters high, which is about 60 feet tall, from this part here of the vault to the floor. The walls are pretty thick, and then it's about 40 meters wide, about 40 feet wide, and it's about 40 meters long, which is about 120 feet long. So it's long and tall. Then on the ceiling, on the top, the ceiling had to be rebuilt at some point because it was leaking. It was not originally wasn't built as sound and waterproof as it should have been. So in the 1500s was rebuilt, and then they profit to make the barracks of the Swiss guards in here. So on the attic, on the top part of the chapel, they were the barracks of the Swiss guard for a while. And then of course there's a part underneath. If you visited the Vatican museums in the last 10-15 years, if you go if you have been to the Borgia apartments, the contemporary art collection that has 20th century art, you go in some large vaulted rooms, some of which they have artworks by Matisse, Van Gogh, and other contemporary artists, Dali, and so on. Those rooms are right underneath the Sistine Chapel. So you walk underneath. I always said you should put a sign there. I always tell to my clients, but it's something that most people walk through. They don't even realize that right underneath the Sistine Chapel. And the military look is because the architects were two military engineers, Baccio Pontelli and Giovannino De Dolci, which provided the designs and then the actual building. They both work as military architects most of their career. And originally the chapel was looking very different than it is today. The ceiling was just blue with little stars, gilded stars. Probably not in this concentric way like in this drawing. Probably they were like organized in a way to reflect a kind of astral map, like the zodiac or a certain date of the birth, either of the Pope or someone else. But there isn't a study about that yet. There's only some reproduction or image how the ceiling could have been like this, you see, with kind of a specific stars as the sky will look in a specific day of the year, which could be the day of the Assumption. The Assumption of Mary is the 15th of August, which is the saint to which the chapel is actually dedicated to. And then if we go back on the sides, the greatest architects and painters that were working in Florence at the time for the Medici, so Botticelli, Perugino, Ghirlandaio, they were all sent to Rome by Lorenzo il Magnifico. So the Pope wanted the best artists that were working in Florence, he wanted them in Rome, just also to prove a point that Rome was kind of overtaking Florence as the crib of the Renaissance. And here we have the two former enemies, now friends. On the left, Lorenzo il Magnifico, Lorenzo de' Medici, and to the right, the Pope Sixtus, who had this good political idea of getting the thing. Now, let's go. Just reading some of the comments. So before we actually explore the scenes, I want to go back inside again into the model, because we have let's get around here. Let's use the 3D model. So let's walk. I hope not to give you make you seasick with this. We go through the end of the chapel here. This model is available on the museivaticani.va, vaticanmuseum.va website for free, so you can navigate, but of course there's no commentary with it. So actually this is the main altar wall. This to the right is the entrance from which millions of tourists enter till the beginning of this year. Currently the museums are closed. They will be closed till January 15. And on the right, you can see there are 6 squares. Originally there were 2 more on the ends, but of course were covered then later on or repainted. And on the right, there are episodes of the life of Jesus Christ. So this is Pietro Perugino, the christening of Jesus Christ. And then opposite, Perugino, I remind you, was one of the greatest artists of the 1400s. He was the master of Raphael and really a remarkable master of the early Renaissance. And then on the opposite wall, we have the circumcision of the son of Moses here, and then Moses starts his journey. Now the fact that Moses' life and Jesus Christ's life are facing each other, it's not a chance. It's just like something designed to compare the two great religions, of which, of course, for the Christians, Judaism was like the ancestor religion. And so every promise made in the Old Testament then for the Christians became true in the gospel, in the come of Jesus. So that's why most of the steps of the life of Jesus Christ are compared to the steps of Moses as founders of religions. And now if we get, and we're talking at the times in the 14th century Italy, the Jewish community was very well integrated into the Italian cities, especially in Florence, but also in Rome. And there were a lot of cultural relationship and exchange. It was later on that then the Jewish community were close into the ghettos or even exiled from, for example, from southern Italy for some part. But at that time, Italy was very hospitable with the Jewish community, were a flourishing Jewish community. And then you could see here Botticelli then with the Daughters of Jethro. Now I'll show you pictures with more details. And then we have Botticelli again. So Sandro Botticelli, the greatest artist of the mid 1400s in Florence, or one of the greatest, the author of the Birth of Venus, the Spring, the famous paintings at the Uffizi Gallery, with the temptation of Christ tempted by the devil. And here a sort of a classical sacrifice with a number of contemporaries painted there. I just switched back to the presentation so I can show you some details. Perugino used this beautiful setting with natural rocks and the city in the background, which is, of course, the city of Rome. All these Florentine artists were amazed by the ruins of ancient Rome, the ruins of the city. And of course, the Renaissance was much about studying and really giving new life to the classical art and architecture. So you could see the Arch of Constantine, you could see the Collegium and the Pantheon down on the left. And then, of course, you have the baptism of Christ in the center, and a number of people that would have been contemporaries, people known at that time. I'll show you some of them because, of course, there are hundreds of figures painted there. And on the opposite wall, we have, of course, not just the one opposite, the one next, the Moses, which is the one in the center in green and yellow, with the Daughters of Jethro. You might recognize that the Daughters of Jethro, some of them kind of look pretty much like, did I open it before? No, sorry. They look pretty much like the this one especially, and this one over there, like the Birth of Venus, or some of the graces in the spring by Botticelli. And of course, on the back there's Moses getting his shoes off and meeting God in the shape of a burning bush, telling him go to the promised land. And it took 40 years for the Jews to reach the promised land. You can see on here on the left the procession with the Jews taken out. There's also two Abyssinian ones, because of course it's an image of that is painted in the chapel of the Pope in the Catholic Church. So and the Pope wanted to be the leader of all the Christians, and at that time, of course, there was a Christian community in the Middle East, in Armenia, in Ethiopia, so all over, as well as also there's also Jewish community in Ethiopia, and on the right there's Moses defending a Jewish boy that was being harassed by the Egyptians. So he realized that they were slaves, and so he had to take them to freedom. It's a beautiful fresco, and if you look at these details right here in the center, there is an oak tree. The oak tree is not casual. It's an allegory, a symbol of the Della Rovere family. The oak tree is on the coat of arms of the Della Rovere, and the little acorns are even made of wax gilded, so they are three-dimensional. Now they're kind of faded, you can barely see them, but back in times, imagine them bright gold, like a kind of the golden balls on the Christmas tree, and so they would reflect light pretty much with a lot of gold. And there's a lot of gold in the fresco overall. All the bright yellow you see, that is actually gold. And of course, the chapel of the Sistine Chapel, the chapel of the Pope, was the chapel for the private services of the Pope. So it was a show off of power. It was not just like a place of celebration. It was also a place where the political and religious authority of the Pope was shown off. Now, generally, if you study the frescoes, the first thing they tell you is like the frescoes were used in the Middle Ages to explain the gospel and the Bible and religions to people which were mostly illiterate at that time. They couldn't read. they had to rely on images. And even during the praying, during the preachers were using pictures on the scroll just to show people what they were, like a comic book, to illustrate what they were talking about, to keep people's attention. They relied very soon on the power of images. But in this case, this is different, because this was not an humble place. This was a place for the popes, for theologians, for ambassadors, for people of power. So here there's an affirmation of political and theological superiority of the Roman Catholic Church in the 1480s. These frescoes were made about 1481, 1482, 83, 84, so in the early 1480s. This little doggy, which can be found in many, many frescoes, there's the doggy here on the left. You can see this boy is carrying the doggy on the left, and there is, I can actually, can I zoom in a little bit here? Yes, a little bit. I can zoom. And then you can see here the little doggy here. This dog was actually a pet of one of the other painters, Cosimo Rosselli. There were about 15, 20 painters in there, 3 or 4 workshops, but each one of them had like a number of pupils. Cosimo Rosselli had his own pet dog, like this little white Chihuahua-ish kind of type of dog. Okay, let me just get, and this doggy, he's painted 5 more times in the Sistine Chapel. In total, you find it 6 times. So imagine that on the scaffolding when they were painting in the 1400s, this little dog was some of the painters' dog, and was going up and down and barking and, you know, being pet by all the artists. So each one of them painted and made a portrait of the little doggy. Now, on the opposite wall, back on the episode of the Life of Christ, so right here, there is the calling of the disciples Peter and Andrew by Domenico Ghirlandaio. Ghirlandaio was the master of Michelangelo as well. A few years later, in 1485, so after this was done, Ghirlandaio made the Tornabuoni Chapel in Florence, amongst other things. And in there also Michelangelo, who was 14 at the time, worked for him. So this was the Michelangelo's master. And if we go back on the presentation, you can see it's more statuary. There's a different kind of vibe. You see each different artist at different things. This actually looks pretty much like the Tornabuoni Chapel. And and there's St. Peter calling the brothers Peter and Andrew, which were fishermen, saying, "Come with me and make you fishermen of men, of souls." And in the background on the left, down on the left, where there's this kind of stone, there's a couple of boys. The one on the right has a garland in his hair. This is a secret signature. The artist's name was Ghirlandaio. It means garland in English. So he put a boy with a garland in his hair, like a symbol of hidden signature. On the opposite wall, there's another fresco that has a similar, they're called Cryptomania, a pot of red paint with a brush, a paintbrush. And I'll show you on the other wall here, there is the crossing of the Red Sea, with, of course, the Egyptian being smashed in the waters, and Moses here, and a number of other knights and other people. And then if we get, let me just get one more step this way, and we look up. This one is Moses and the gilded calf. You know, he went up on the Mount Sinai to get the 10 commandments, and it's coming down, showing them to the Jews. And then it was basically getting very upset because in the meanwhile, the Jews had turned pagan, worshiping the gilded calf. So right here on the bottom, there is the little doggy that we saw before. Again, another version of the doggy coming out of the frame, and next to it, a pot of paint, of which I have the detail, because with the 3D model, you can't really zoom in too much. So this is Cosimo Rosselli, red paint, Rosselli Rosso, so means red in Italian. And so we have Rosselli signature there as painter. Then follows next the speech of the mountain and the healing of the leper, and the we saw before the Temptation of Christ by Botticelli. This building here, the center, it still exists today. It's between the Vatican and the river. It's called the Collegium Saxorum. Was the place where the Britons, the British, the Saxon pilgrims in the Middle Ages used to stay. It's actually before Hastings, so they were Saxons, I guess. And at the very end, there is then the Last Supper, with, of course, all the disciples on one side, but Judas, which has a devil that talks in the back of his head, just driving him to to, of course, doing the betrayal of Christ. You can see it's like a little creature right in the back, and his halo is kind of like gone dark, and it's like of a like a lead color, like gray and dark, while the others are all bright, and especially Jesus Christ one with the Eucharist. And then if we look in the background, there are more scenes. We are talking about, sorry, so there are more scenes here in the center. There are 3 windows, and look how there are 3 more episodes of the Passion of Christ. This is the capture of Christ, when Christ is captured by, after being betrayed by Judas with a kiss. And then on the ceiling, in a perspective, again, the coat of arms of the Pope with the cross keys, which is the symbol of the papacy, and the oak tree, which is the personal coat of arms of the family. And then comes one of the greatest masterpieces that can be found in the Sistine Chapel. This is Pietro Perugino, the handling of the keys. This is when Jesus Christ gave to Peter the keys of the kingdom of heaven, saying him, Peter, you are a stone, upon this stone I'll build my church. And this is the episode of which the authority and the claims of the Pope being the leader of all the Christians are based on. The fact that because St. Peter came to Rome, died in Rome, and is buried underneath St. Peter's Basilica, he was the very first bishop of Rome. So every bishop of Rome after him should be the leader and the supreme authority of the Catholic Church. Of course, during the centuries, many other Christian communities that at the beginning were all independent communities, pretty much like arranged like the Muslim religion, where every group has his own imam, and they're the beliefs are all the same, but then they're different groups with some slightly different views and different practices. Of course, over the centuries, they're diversified. So the early Christian community was like that. So also like the Jewish community. So with slightly different, even different gospels still, the early Middle Ages. So the Pope always said, no, we need to be one, and I have to make all the rules, and then you have to follow basically what the church says. Not so much at the beginning of the Middle Ages, but towards the 12, 13, 1400s. That's where the Eastern Western Church and a few other churches started to split. And then again, of course, in the 14, 1500s with Protestantism. We are just about on the verge of Protestantism. We're about 25, 30 years before Martin Luther and the Protestantism. So this was kind of a prophetic. The Pope wanted to reassure his power. And the fresco is magnificent on a aesthetic point of view. There's this beautiful octagonal building, possibly a baptistry, which reminds a lot the baptistry of St. John in Florence, the one just opposite the Duomo, which is actually a 7th, 8th century building. So it goes back to the Middle Ages. And on the sides, the triumphal arches, again, another homage to the Roman architecture. And then Perugino worked with a large workshop. So he actually, the figures in the background were made by Pinturicchio, his pupil. Perugino trained many artists, including also Raphael, as I said. And we can see a number of contemporaries here. And on the right, these two are Giovannino de' Dolci and Baccio Pontelli, which were the builder and the architect of the Sistine Chapel, which is still living, and they were we were still living when the fresco was done, and they're actually portrayed there, amongst other contemporaries and other figures. You can see they have the compass and the square, of course, symbol of their trade. And on the opposite wall, there is this magnificent fresco, which is the punishment of Datan, Abiron, and Korah. Now, if we go back on the model, can we go back on the model? No. It's basically at the end on the right, so opposite to the one we've just seen of the handling of the keys. This also is a very strong religious and political message. First of all, this is Moses punishing the rebels that were trying to stone him. If you look on the right, the people have stones that were about to stone him, and on the left he punishes them, and then a crack open in the floor, and then they go straight down to hell because they challenge the authority of the church, basically. And the authority of the church is represented by Aaron here in the background, and Aaron and Moses are here. They're representing exactly the same. They are like twins, even though we know they were not. They were brothers, but not twins. And Aaron, which is the one at the back with the blue cape, has the tiara, the pointed hat with 3 rings, used by the Pope. It was like the Pope's crown. So that symbolized the religious authority. And in the background, in the marble arch there, which is a copy of the triumphal arch of Constantine, which Botticelli pretty much admired, and he put in this fresco. It says "Nemo" in Latin, "Nemo sibi assumat honorem nisi vocatus adeo tamquam Aaron." And for those who are not fluent in Latin, no one should assume such an honor if not called directly by God as Aaron was. So the Pope wants to give this clear message. I am sitting here on the chair of Peter, and because we were called by God, you cannot question or challenge my authority. And then behind the marble arch on the left, right here, lying here on the left, there's a number of also contemporaries or other figures. There is a ship. One of the ship has a flag with the coat of arms of Florence. So Botticelli lived kind of a boring life. He was born in Santa Trinita. He lived in an area of Florence, not far from along the River Arno, and he never left. Actually, he lived and he's buried in the same church when he was christened. So he actually never moved. And he lived a relatively long life. It was late 60s when he died. And he spent in Rome probably a year and a half. And then his father died, so he asked the permission to go back to Florence. And he then came back to Rome. He didn't probably like Rome. He wanted to stay in Florence. And the last one is, of course, the Testament and the Ark of the Covenants by Luca Signorelli, another artist which work in this quite large and long workshop. Now, about 20 years fast forward, we are at the beginning of 1500s. The Pope is long dead. There's been the Pope Borgia in the middle, known for being a very corrupted Pope, very interested in politics, very little in religion, with a number of children, the father of Cesare Borgia. There's also a series about the Borgias that will take us too far, but it's a very interesting period of history. And after that, the nephew of Pope Sixtus became Pope. His name was Julius II. Here on the left, we can see his portrait, which was actually made in the Vatican, in one of the rooms, in the rooms of Raphael, in one of those rooms around there, one of those smaller rooms next to those, in which the Pope lived at the time. And the frescoes were made by Raphael for this Pope. This Pope also asked Donato Bramante to destroy the old Basilica of St. Peter and to build a completely new one, a giant one, which is the present one that we can see now, with the giant dome on top. So Donato Bramante is the architect who actually introduced him, also Raphael. And Michelangelo was then called in to create a giant tomb in the shape of a pyramid, something like this, right on the top of the tomb of Peter, or right behind the main altar, just to show how great this Pope was. They knew that the Basilica would take a few decades. So after a couple of years, the Pope ran out of money. He changed his mind. Bramante somehow convinced him that it was bad luck to build your own tomb while you're still living. While you're living, you should think about more things that living people do. So, and he was a Pope that was known to be more familiar with the sword than the sprinkler. So it meant that he spent more time at war, actually leading his army, rather than on the altar praying or saying mass. And because it was also head of the state at that time, the church had its own kingdom. And he had a very difficult relationship with Michelangelo, because Michelangelo made some beautiful statues, made 7 statues, 6 known as the prisoners, this kind of standing figures at the bottom. 4 of them are currently in the Galleria dell'Accademia in Florence. 2 of them are in the I don't have them here, are in the Louvre Museum, the most beautiful ones, because the French pinched them from us in the past. Let's not talk about that. And Napoleon's trip. And the Pope on the left, this portrait is actually in the National Gallery in London currently, and made by Raphael. So it's a great masterpiece. You can see the acorns again. They were kind of obsessed with their coat of arms. It's everywhere. It's like the very first branding. It's like Louis Vuitton in the 1500s or Gucci, their family crest became like present everywhere and every art. That's where the Gucci thing to put or the Louis Vuitton putting their symbol, the logo everywhere comes from, basically. And then Michelangelo wasn't paid for the job. He made the Moses that you could see on the right, was supposed to be one of the statues for this tomb, which was only finished some 40 years later. So Michelangelo went back to Florence. It took 2 years to convince him to come back. By 1508, then Michelangelo came back and decided to start doing the ceiling. Now, the ceiling had a very difficult aspect. First of all, Michelangelo didn't consider himself a painter. He considered himself a sculptor. Second, although he was trained in painting and in the fresco painting because he had worked in the workshop of Ghirlandaio in Florence, he didn't like doing that physically, also because of the consequences. He had to build a scaffolding to get up. Not a scaffolding like this, because it would have been too high. So the scaffolding was built using ropes anchored on the ceiling, on the vaults, on the beams, through holes through the vault that Michelangelo didn't want it. So the original scaffolding built by Bramante had to be taken down, and a new one had to be built to reach the ceiling, on which Michelangelo wanted to paint the creation. The Pope asked for the disciples, for the apostles. Michelangelo came up with a more complex project, which was kind of unusual because the artists usually were told precisely what to do and they were just concentrating on how to do it best. But in this case, Michelangelo was highly cultivated. He grew up in the house of Lorenzo Magnifico with philosophers. He had a kind of a superior level of culture. So he also had to build his own scaffolding using the so-called buche pontaie. So the problem with scaffolding is the Sistine Chapel, being some 20 meters tall, it would have taken months and lots of money and workers to build the scaffolding from the floor up to the ceiling. They wanted something suspended. So Michelangelo found the building holes. Now, when you're in Italy and you see those holes in like middle-aged towers or in brick walls, there's a number of openings there with the pigeon's nest. Most people think that they were built for the pigeons, for their house, because we apparently love so much the pigeons. And the pigeons might think so, but they were not built for the pigeons. They were buche pontaie. They were built to, they were left to put beams through in order to put suspended scaffoldings. So when you build a wall, instead of having to build a scaffolding from the bottom to the top, you only put the beams in at the level you need. You put some planks across and you have a self-sustaining scaffolding, and then you get people going up. This is way before health and safety. So you only need, like, a guy, a couple of beams, a plank, a rope, and that's it. No helmets, no nothing. It was very, very, it was dangerous, actually. People fell. Even Michelangelo fell from the scaffolding. So it was kind of concerned about that as well. So you can see this is a digital model. This is not a real picture, but it shows you how this was made with the steps on the right. Now, Gianluigi Colalucci, the restorer, the one who cleaned all the chapels, so he worked for about 10 years in the ceiling. He said, he tried, it's impossible to paint while laying on your back. You have to stand. You can be on your knees, but you have to stand, because with your back on the floor or on a surface, painting is not possible because you can't move. You have not enough room. So he was definitely not on his back on the sides. It was standing. And he even made a drawing of himself here with a sonnet in which he describes all the pain and the suffering of doing the ceiling. The little image on the right is actually Michelangelo sketching himself as a caricature, like painting there hours and hours, almost losing his sight by looking up so many hours, and then having the paint dripping on his face. Now, the fresco required a certain speed because you have to paint on a wet plaster in order to the plaster to go to the color to go into the plaster and to actually soak in and leave a deep level of color. So even if it's scratched, the fresco is still there. That's how they like the colors, the plaster, preparing a number of the frames or parts that were not essential. But the details of the face, the bodies, all the main parts were all made by Michelangelo's hand. That's why it took him 2 years and a half to do the first half. Then the scaffolding was taken down and built on the other half, so they only had to use half of the scaffolding and move. And then the part closer to the altar was the one that was made last. So before we see the details, let's go back again inside the chapel. And you could see here on the ceiling, so Michelangelo, actually, the story starts from here, from above the main wall, with God separating dark and light, God creating the planets, God's bottom up here. Apparently, Michelangelo was kind of raving about painting God's bottom on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. He didn't want to be irrespectful, or he didn't want to be he didn't want to mock the Pope. But there was something there that he taught, because we know there's about the several biographies that were built were written while Michelangelo was still alive. So we know that he made a lot of comments about this idea of making gods in that way. And then here we have, of course, the creation of Adam and the creation of Eve with the, of course, the Garden of Eden and the fall. You know, they fall into the temptation of the snake that ends up again as a female figure, and then Adam and Eve on the left, and then on the right you have Adam and Eve being sent away of the Garden of Eden. Now I got the picture to show you in more detail. Michelangelo actually started painting on this side here, so the side towards the main door. Later going, in fact, you could see that on this side over here, right here, the figures are smaller. This is Noah's trumpet, Noah's Ark, and Noah's Thanksgiving. So the last three episodes of the life of Noah's. The figures are much smaller, while towards the beginning they are much, much bigger over here, because he realized, seeing them from the floor, how small they will look like in the end. And then on the sides there are also these naked figures and a number of other families. These are the ancestors of Jesus Christ. So they are the connection between the Old Testament, King David, and then Joseph and Jesus Christ. So all as listed in the Gospel of Matthew. So there's a quite complex theological representation, as well as the symbols here on the left and the prophets, which are a symbol of Jewish and Christian theology. Now let's go back on the presentation. So I have the more detail. So of course God is represented with this kind of pink pajama, very kind of muscly figure with the traditional like long beard white man, which is something that's been represented in this way for a few hundred years in Western art, and which is something very different from, for example, in Jewish and Islamic art. There's no way you find, sometimes not even human figure, because the human being made as an image of God, of course, it was seen as irreligious, irrespectful to represent the human figure. That's why so much, especially Islamic art, it's geometrical and aniconic. There's no human figure represented. While Christian art embraced the tradition of Greek and Roman art, and so that's why there's plenty of representation, even on naked figures, even in a religious environment, which might seem shocking, but it was kind of a very appreciated feature at that time. All these naked guys hanging around the frames with the creation are basically an homage to the masterpiece of the creation, the human body. And also, starting with Botticelli in the half of the 1400s, the human body became the main subject of art. They, since then, till the 19th century, till basically the Impressionists, they all thought that the only thing that an artist should be doing and the best subject to represent, it's a nude. It's a nude, whether male or female. Male, of course, it was used more because it was connected with heroism, with a number of embracing of virtues, of victories, embracing a number of values which were more political, while usually female nudity was more connected with beauty, with, of course, with sex, with enjoyment, with allegories and morality. And here we have the absolute masterpiece of the ceiling that is very well known, the creation of Adam, where again Michelangelo does his own interpretation of the creation of Adam. Adam is, first of all, laying down very relaxed in this beautiful posture, and with this background which is almost non-existing. It's just a green line and then a little blue shading, and then the ceiling, and that's it. And then the sky. There's no flowers, no decoration. The random hand that you see at the bottom is just grabbing. It's one of the naked guys in between the frame, grabbing the basket with the acorns, which is the symbol of the Della Rovere family again. And then you can see there is a gap. It's about an inch between the two fingers. So there is the distance between God and man. But in the gospel, it doesn't say that human man was created like that. It says that Adam was modeled in clay, and then God breathed through the nostrils, which I don't think would have looked great as a scene on a fresco, having like a man blowing air into another man's nostrils. But in this case, Michelangelo wanted to show God as the creator who creates the human being, who is himself also creative. That's why the hand, we create through our hands. And the fact that there's a distance is because there's a radical difference between God and man. But man is somehow divine. And the spark of divinity is in the fact that as an artist, Michelangelo taught that we can create beauty. And now Michelangelo was a follower of Plato, Platonic philosophy. For Plato, there is a perfect ideal world, of which this world is nothing but a copy, created by the soul of God that models the universe. And God didn't create the universe because he needed the universe, because otherwise it would not be the Almighty God, but created for his own enjoyment, because he enjoyed himself in that. That's what the Bible says. And so for Michelangelo, we are creator of beauty, like God is creator of beauty, because we enjoy ourselves in art. We reflect and we see ourselves in art, and then not because we need it, but because there's a sublime enjoyment in art, and that's what creates for Michelangelo the as I see it, the similarity, the divine part. Plus, God is surrounded by a number of angels without wings, which is not something that Michelangelo invented. Also, at some point, Botticelli stops putting the wings on the angels, and because they were looking more at classical art, Roman art, you can create some figures that are flying around without wings. You don't need really wings. And then there is, the beautiful beard and hair of God with the beautiful also outfit. But the shape in which God is basically framed, this kind of flying mantle, has the shape of a human brain. Has an American physician. This is one of the drawings that Michelangelo made as a study on the body of Michelangelo. In this one, you can see that he learned a lot from classical artworks, the Belvedere Torso. Anyway, a few decades ago, there was an American physician who actually, by chance, was studying the human brain and looked up, and they had a poster of the creation, and he realized that it's pretty much the same cross-section as the human brain. I mean, I'm not sure if this is just coincidence or is deliberate, although it's pretty accurate. And because dissecting corpses in human bodies was very difficult in the 1500s, in the 14 and 1500s. It was not illegal, but it was very difficult to find, corpse to be able to study it. Michelangelo had the chance because he he had the permission from Medici to do it in the Ospedale Santo Spirito in Florence on the Oltrarno, in a beautiful complex still existing, and for which he made a crucifix that recently has been proved by his artwork, a beautiful crucifix, which is still in the same church for it was made for. And not many people could recognize it anyway, so I don't think there's really a message. What I find fascinating, if you know the telefilm Westward, where there is Sir Anthony Hopkins, he uses these images to prove that Michelangelo was able to hide in plain sight a truth he really believed, that a higher power doesn't come from basically control of fronts or strength. It comes from a higher knowledge. And so this is a message that could be Michelangelo. I'm not sure if it is. I don't think we have enough evidence for that, because, of course, it was something that people would have not been able to recognize. Usually hidden symbols and symbology, they're more there because people, there were some people who had access to it, but at that time that wasn't something that people could have access. And then Adam and Eve being tempted. I like this picture because it's got the before and after the restoration. You can see yourself the difference. Many cracks were filled and the colors have been brought back. I really think that the restoration of the Sistine Chapel has been one of the greatest endeavors done in the last century. Really led us to discover Michelangelo in a complete different way. And you can see Eve here pretty maskily. Michelangelo paints female figures pretty much like men with breasts, like very masculine in the framing, and then you have them quite close together, and then the snake tempting them, the devil tempting them, and the snakes been symbolized by a female, because of course for Michelangelo and lots of the Catholic Church, every trouble and sin came from women, as I'm sure as every married man can agree upon. I'm just kidding, it's just a joke. I hope my wife hasn't heard me. So I'm just kidding. Of course, this was a vision that the church hasn't got anymore. But you could see that Michelangelo as well represented them before, but had been integrated with this tree, which is a fig tree. He doesn't represent the fig leaf, but the fig tree, because later on with the fig leaf they would have covered their nudities. And then on the right you could see Adam and Eve turn suddenly old and ugly and afraid and scared, and of course the fatigue. And there are some models that Michelangelo studied. Now, artists are little thieves. They study, they learn, they steal every details and technique, and they make it their own. This is the secret of the Renaissance: be able to re-elaborate, recreate, and elaborate and retransform in a new way whatever is already out there. So it's not just until let's say Kandinsky or the 20th century art, or late 19th century art was something that was made like, you know, by patching every other elements that artists were putting together, natural, artificial elements, and cultural elements together in, of course, the sensitivity. And then, of course, in 20th century art, Kandinsky just, you know, was the one who said, no, just represent your soul straight on the canvas, and the abstract art was born. And on the left, you could see that's from the the Brancacci Chapel in Chiesa del Carmine, again in Florence, and painted by Masaccio Massimiliano Panigale. It's a beautiful masterpiece, and it's a place that Michelangelo knew very well. There's a question. I believe Michelangelo had more life. Michelangelo loved the male body. He was we can say he was homosexual, and he didn't live probably sexuality very openly, and I don't think it was kind of a complex way he lived. We don't have many information. It's very hard to talk about the personal life of the artists in the Renaissance or in the 16th, 17th century, because contemporaries tend not to describe their personal sexual orientations, or because it was considered, it was used as a slander back in the past, and sadly till not long ago. Now, of course, it's different, so scholars are looking at a different way. But we can say Michelangelo he made no mystery, he loved the male bodies and human bodies. But the reason why there's so many beautiful male bodies represented is not just that, there's a lot more. The sexual orientation doesn't defy totally what an artist does. Every person is a lot more than, you know, of their personality. It's part of it, of course, it cannot be denied, it's part of that, but it's not the only thing. There's a lot more. So I always prefer a wider approach. Michelangelo moved to Rome permanently in 1534, as we will see soon. He had a companion, boyfriend, we're not sure the relationship, much younger. He was in his 20s. His name was Tommaso de Cavalieri. Some of the most beautiful drawings that Michelangelo made, they were gifts for this man that he loved so much. So there is a happy ending after all. On the right, there is the Laocoon, which is a beautiful statue of Greek artist from Rhodes. This was discovered at the beginning of 1500 in Rome by the Collegium in a street called Via dei Serpenti, the Snake Street. It's if you look at the Collegium, there's a street that just cuts the hill opposite, Via degli Annibaldi, and then one straight on that goes up all the way up to the Quirinale Hill. That's Via dei Serpenti. Around there, in 1505, this statue popped up just from the ground as they were digging to build the building. And Michelangelo saw it because he was in Rome then, and he could see that, unearthed it. And it had really a deep impact. They represent the high priest of Troy, Laocoon, being killed by the snakes together with his children. The snakes also is already, we will see that also being used in the Sistine Chapel as a model. And it is, yes, in the Vatican museums is also one of my favorite statues, because it's classic art, Greek art, but it's also it's got a dynamism, live movement, and this is what it taught to the artists like Michelangelo, to represent the human body in the torso. After he saw this statue, Michelangelo would never make a standing figure anymore, always turning around, moving, showing the muscles, the energy, the movement, giving it life, like he did with the Moses. And it's in the octagonal courtyard in the Pius Clementine Museum inside the Vatican Museum. And there are several copies, though. There's one in the Uffizi, there's copies made in the Renaissance. This, for example, is one of those samples. You see the muscles, the position, the hair. These figures are amazing. Now, we don't have the time to see every single figure because it will take a week. But if you have time, you know, the pictures of the single individual ones are very beautiful, just to explore in the zone. Because in this, Michelangelo really explored the full spectrum of all the position, of all the aspects of the human body, and also in the ancestors and in the Sibyls, the human feelings, the human attitudes, different expression, physical expression, like a kind of a theater, like a fictional show. Now something happened that really made Michelangelo really upset. One day, while he was still working on the chapel, he wasn't in the chapel that day. Donato Bramante, who was the head of the head architect of the Vatican palaces on the Basilica of St. Peter at the time, so he had the keys and access to everything, every building. He entered while Michelangelo was not there, and took Raphael on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel to see his Sibyls, like you could see here, Michelangelo's frescoes. This is a Sibyl, and In the same time, Raphael was working in a small church, Santa Maria della Pace, nearby Piazza Navona, and he painted the Sibyls very similar to ones of Michelangelo. Michelangelo went bananas. He was furious. He started to say, Raphael is a thief. Everything is good in his art. He stole from me. He was quite jealous. Raphael was younger, was very successful. He had a huge workshop, was doing a lot of work, very successful, and unfortunately, he died young. He died in 1520. So this year would have been 500 years anniversary since he died. But in a very short, he was aged 37 when he died. He did a number of masterpieces. And yes, he was a thief. He was able to incorporate and learn lessons from Michelangelo, from Leonardo. He lived in Florence for 4 years, studying Raphael and Michelangelo. Leonardo and Michelangelo. He went there because they were there. And also he was able to study and incorporate also the Venetian masters like Lorenzo Lotto, Sebastiano del Piombo, which were working at the Vatican at the same time. The Vatican at the beginning of 1500s is the place where all the greatest artists were. For a few years, 3-4 years, Leonardo, Michelangelo, and Raphael were there. Leonardo was the only one that didn't produce any art in the Vatican at that time, was more studying anatomy, his machines, and his stuff. And he was also at the end of his life, was in his 60s because he was much older than the others. These are the ancestors of Christ above the windows, which are amazing. Fortunately, we don't have the time tonight to see them all, but they are really amazing. If you have, let's go back to if you have, what we can do with this model, we can actually go up here, which is something that you're not allowed to do anymore. But until 100 years ago, people could actually climb and walk on the side of the windows, like this is during the Grand Tour before mass tourism. So you can go up here. We are about 15 meters, about 45, 50 feet from the floor, and you can actually see the fresco from close. And then you can see above the windows, there are all these ancestors of Jesus Christ sitting there with different expressions, different positions, different colors. It's an amazing gallery of figures. It's really, really something beautiful. And also here in this kind of pendants here between the vault and the lunette, the little moons above the windows. Now we can go let's go to so on the corner there are 4 more scenes. This is the gilded snake with Moses making the gilded snake to save the Jews from the poisonous snake. And then if we turn, let me go back downstairs. Some of these windows frames, there's also some graffiti, not here, but some of them are also graffiti of visitors in the past. If we go to the center, there's also beautiful mosaic ceiling made by the maestri marmorari romani, or cosmateschi, they're called sometimes. You could see here Esther and Assuero in the other pendant here, Moses and the gilded snake, and on the opposite wall, 2 beheading, why not? And David and Goliath, and Judith and Holofernes. Judith was this Jewish heroine who beheaded the general Holofernes, was about to invade Israel. So they all, and as David beheaded the giant Goliath. So they're all scenes about bravery and freedom, and the fact that you have to kill the head to your enemies, and the coat of arms of the Della Rovere family. And then the ceiling was completed in about 4 years, between 1508 and 1512. Michelangelo went back to Florence. He did a number of other things. Amongst them was also for a few weeks or months, he had to hide himself in the underground of the Cappella di San Lorenzo in Florence because Alessandro de' Medici wanted his head because he fought for the Republic against the Medici. So he had quite an adventurous life. But the great masterpiece and achievement was yet to come. In 1530s, there was another Medici, Clemens VII became Pope, and he wanted Michelangelo to come back and finish the fresco, make the large Last Judgment, this one here that we see here, on the main wall. I'll go back to the model so we can see it from the model. The Pope Medici unfortunately died before Michelangelo could do it. And this Clement VII, his name was Giulio di Giuliano de' Medici. He was the son of the assassinated Medici, the brother of Lorenzo the Magnificent. So he was the nephew of Lorenzo the Magnificent. And he knew Michelangelo since they were children. They basically grew together. And that's what you come to do when you are, pal with the Pope since childhood. And the Pope after was Pope Paul III Farnese. He's the Pope who started the Catholic Reformation. kind of the reaction to not just the Lutheranism, which that happened much earlier, but also the Church of England left in 1532. So the Catholic Church said, okay, we need to reform now as well, because otherwise we're going to lose every country. We're going to be just us. And because people soon realized they didn't need the Pope and the Catholic Church. Every king can be their own leader of the church, and they can do their own thing, and without having to pay or to obey to Rome. Pay taxes. They were paying heavy taxes. Every Catholic country had to send a lot of money every year to the Church of Rome, and then also obey to a number of rules and things, have permission for almost everything. So they said, no, we don't need this anymore. The German Protestants were the first, and then the English, Henry VIII was the second. The divorce was only like the kind of excuse, but they were planning that, I think, from before. And here we have the Last Judgment. So we saw the creation, the Moses, the prophets, the Sibyls, Jesus Christ, and then there are the popes painted between the windows here. These were painted in the 1480s, and how all the history of creation is going to end up with the Last Judgment. Because, of course, in one of the things that the Bible tells us, I'm not particularly religious myself, but of course I had to study all this for doing what I do. I was raised Catholic, of course, and Catholic schools as well. And one of the things about the Bible is that every beginning has an end. Every story has then an end. That's why I think in Hollywood, a lot of screenwriters and directors, very good ones, they have a Jewish heritage, even if they might not be religious people, but they have, because there is this way of telling the story that I think is very, you can find there that, like in Steven Spielberg movies, there's always a beginning and an end. Now everything has to end. And so also, the word, there's a creation and then there'll be an end. And the Romans and the Greeks, they taught more like kind of an eternal circles of generations. Like they thought of the universe as eternal. It's something that comes from a Jewish mentality, and then it came in through Christianity and Islamism through Judaism, and the fact that this beginning at the end, an eternal circle, and also with the end will be a retribution, which is this, and the Last Judgment, which is a terrifying masterpiece. Giorgio Vasari was a friend of Michelangelo, also one of the first art historians who wrote a book with all the lives of the painters of the 1500s, describes the fear that you felt by standing in front of this masterpiece. Now I'll be using now here a picture so I can zoom a little bit better in. And so Michelangelo started in 1534-35 and then finished by 1541. So it took him a lot longer, 6-7 years to do the wall. So much longer than the ceiling, which only took about 4 years, which is long, but and then it starts here at the bottom with the resurrection of the flesh. The corpses in the shrouds are resurrecting, the flesh is going back, and then they pull up by these angels. All the angels have no wings, as we said before. Of course, you could even see, the two black guys, two Moors here, they call back them, and because of course there's a resurrection for everybody. So again, there's this idea of inclusion of the whole population of the world, even at the stage where there weren't many relationships. I mean, there were trade relationship, and later on there will also be political, diplomatic relationship with Africa, with the Near East, even with the Far East. But in the 1500s, it was a war very small that just got a little larger through trade. And then you could see the souls going up. And then here, all waiting to be judged, they're all scared. Look at their faces. You could see the terror in the face because it's the judgment by God. They don't know deep in their heart what they're going to be. And you can see this woman here. She looked like a man, giant, massive arm with just breast popped on, and that's how Michelangelo created the female figures. Not very the very muscle, large shoulders. That's the way he embodies the body, the beauty of the body. In the center stands Jesus Christ, which is not the skinny Jesus we are used to. It's a massive muscle man, and then you can see that also is beardless, pretty much like this figure here, the Apollo at Belvedere, which is next to the Laocoon, so it's in the Vatican Museum as well, which was already there in the 1400s. Michelangelo saw it and studied it, and as many artists did. And you could see that the hairstyle, the the body, the muscle. The Michelangelo one is even more muscly. So this is not the skinny Jesus that you normally see hanging on a cross, which is, it's been sacrificed for us to be saved. No, he is actually now judging. He's like a pagan god. You can see I also got here my little copy of the Apollo that keeps me company, although it's quite heavy. Sorry. Oh gosh, I forgot how heavy that was. And then imagine Michelangelo, of course, on the scaffolding and painting every detail. Only the head, it took him quite a while. Before Michelangelo intervention, there were the Moses rescued from the waters and the adoration of the child made by Perugino, made before the frescoes were covered. And then there was an altarpiece, this one with the Assumption of Mary, again by Perugino, all completely lost. They were covered, so Michelangelo already covered them. Then you can see some of the details of the people. You could see the black man there, and this is one of my favorite figures. But let's get to it. We see Virgin Mary next to Jesus Christ, Peter and Paul. Paul looks quite scared here. Peter is giving back the keys, and then we have St. Lawrence and Bartholomew with the skin, which actually is the self-portrait of Michelangelo, and we will talk about that, because Michelangelo, let me just see, so put himself as this kind of melting skin. Now, but San Bartholomew was flayed, his skin was flayed, so in order to kill him, and it was one of the early Christian martyrs. Michelangelo actually portrayed the saint different than the skin. Two faces don't match. This actually, San Bartholomew looks a lot like a poet, Pietro Aretino, who was the Pope's official poet in the 1500s, and is this one here, who actually criticized Michelangelo because of the nudes, of the nudity. He thought it was too much nudity, wasn't appropriate for the chapel of the Pope. And Michelangelo felt kind of offended, and so he put, his own skin in the hands of this man, like, you want to have me skin. But it's also, what I personally think, is also a way that he wanted to pass this message. As an artist, his soul shares the creation that it was instilled. It was the greatest gift that God gave to us. So his soul is pure. His soul is already with God. Well, it would be skin. What would be judged would be his skin, which of course he was a sinner, like everybody else, and probably he felt also some sort of guilt. He was very religious. He belonged to a group called the Spirituali, which were followers of a Spanish theologian called Juan de Valdez, who believed that if you have faith, God speaks straight to you the truth, and you know the truth instantly. You don't need church, you don't need gospel, you don't need anything. You need faith, and the faith will guide you. Pretty much like, it's similar to some Christian groups, like some Baptist churches or the Pentecostal churches, that a lot of their preaching is based on that faith. And this is something that was originated a lot earlier. It's already in St. Paul's, but it was brought back in the 1500s. And Michelangelo was part of a group of people who believed in this and practiced this in their life. So he believed that the church was kind of corrupted, all the kind of bureaucracy that came in that, and the fact that there was a structure and a bureaucratic way of working. He believed more in divine inspiration and faith. As an artist, he believed that his art came directly from God, and seeing what is done, you can't blame him. Although, that might be also that way of thinking might be, also a bit dangerous, because depending on what you think God tells you. So that's also a tricky road. This one is one of my favorite because he shows the desperation of the soul who is afraid that there is no escape from the sin, there is no salvation. And this is a theme that became very important, especially in 16th, 17th century art. With the religious war in the 1500s, 1600s, there were religious wars all over Europe, and that's when in the 1600s then Pilgrim Fathers went to America to create a country that was free of cult. Everybody could practice their own religion without being persecuted or harmed, which is still one of the pillars of the United States today. In Europe, it wasn't that way. You have to be of the same religion of your king. Otherwise, you get exiled, you get killed, you get tortured. A number of nasty things were done to you. And We have this figure here, scared to death, afraid, with the snake biting him, again, the temptation. So he reconnects with the ceiling, and with these two demons pulling him down, naked. So you could see, actually, all the figures are naked because the resurrection will be resurrecting without our garments. Apparently, for Michelangelo, heaven is like a nudist place. And that didn't go down very well with many people. Pope was kind of okay with that. Pope had 4 children and mistresses, so it was kind of Pope Paul III was kind of an open man. And in the center, so this is the worst of the scenes, the desperation of salvation, the lack of faith. That's why he's so scared. In the center, we have the trumpets of the apocalypse, like in the book of Revelation by John, and then 2 large books, one small one and the big one with the list of the ones going to heaven, and the one with the list of going to hell. Guess which one is which? Michelangelo's slightly on the pessimist side, so you can imagine that big book was for the ones going to hell, which is a far more interesting piece. As I always said, maybe I would like to be in heavens for the weather and in hell for the party, because imagine how many interesting stories they have, while in the heavens there's be wonderful saint people, but many of them are boring lives, possibly. No, I'm just kidding. This is like the kind of jokes that you crack when you were an altar boy waiting to serve mass. And our priest actually told that. And the boatman, Karen. Now, the boatman is not in the gospel, is not in the vision of St. John, the apocalypse, is not, which is the last part of the gospel about the end of the world, basically, and the retribution and the last judgment, is not in any of the theology. It was added by Dante Alighieri, the Italian greatest poet, who died 700 years ago in 1321, is the father of Italian language, one of the first scholars and poets and writers who insisted that Latin should be left behind and modern languages should be used. So he's really the father of modern languages. He wrote in Italian in the 1200s, and he wrote the Divine Comedy, and it's also available in some wonderful English translations if you want to have a read. It's very interesting. Next year I'm planning on doing a series about Dante and art inspired by Dante, just to celebrate this great poet, and who inspired so many artists, including Michelangelo. So you can see this green devil, who actually, I think it was the portrait of the Lord of the that's a good question now about the nudity and Daniela Volterra. I will take that in a minute. Beating the souls, this green guy, actually the portrait of one of the lords of Italy at that time. I think it was the son of a king of Naples or something like that. And then there's a number of other figures. At the door, there is this man here, which is the devil. Where is it? Here. No, this is the boatman. You can see his eyes. It's actually a portrait of a man. And then this one, he's the Minos, the judge of the souls, the one who tells where the souls, which part of the hell they have to go in order to pay back for the sins, with donkey ears and the snake around the body. Someone just asked, let me just read the question again because it's a very good one. Michelangelo painted almost all figures nude, yes, which were covered later by Daniela Volterra. That's true. Actually, so the council, the Catholic Reformation asked Michelangelo to cover all the nudity. Michelangelo was 88 then, so still alive, and he said, "No way, I'm not going up there." And he actually had troubles even before, because this man here that we see, his name was Biagio da Cesena. He was the master of ceremonies of the Pope, like the Pope's secretary. He mocked Michelangelo and insulted him, and he said a number of things about hell and everything. So Michelangelo decided to put him in hell in a very recognizable way. So everybody, the day the chapel was used for the first day in November, the November the 1st, 1541, everybody laughed at him and mocked him because Michelangelo had offended him in that way. But then Michelangelo was asked to cover them. He refused. By saying that, it's only a bit of pain. The church has much bigger problems like corruptions and other things to tackle rather than the fresco. So what happened is that then one of the young artists who had worked with Michelangelo, Daniela Volterra, was asked to cover them. Now the covering of the nudity took place for about 2 or 3 decades, because Daniela Volterra put about 20 coverings. Then they weren't satisfied with that, they put on more, so made also by other artists. There were about 60 figures covered. During the last restoration, many of them, the original color has been chipped away and they've left. So all these that were added, they've been left. Some others have been taken out, so but not that many. I can show you. So like here, there were some more here, but some of them have been reduced, but most of them are still there. So I would say 80-90%. I don't know what it is. I do have a book about that that shows the comparison. I don't have the pictures now on the computer, but just to show you this picture here, that we can have a larger, this is in Naples in the Museo di Capodimonte, and it's a copy of the Sistine Chapel made right at the beginning. This shows all the original nudities. They were all pretty much, on the nude. It's like looks like a French beach, when you have to the seaside in France and everybody's naked. Do you have them in America where people go bare on the beach, no clothing? Maybe California, I don't know. So I'm just kidding. And you can see all naked. The church wasn't okay with that, so they asked him, no, cover them. And so this is another copy. You can see they're all, with their things out. And then this figure here, which is on the corner, Saint Catherine with Saint Biagio, they had to be completely repainted because they were looking like they were having, they were doing a thing. So that was completely repainted. So the one that you see now is not Michelangelo's one. It's been completely redone because it was too much. But this is because there was a shift, a change. Before 1540s, 1550s, you could paint the saints in whatever way you wanted. There wasn't a set scheme. After that, there were some books printed. So this is the same figure. She was completely repainted. And you had to represent the saints in that exact way. If you did not, you could go to the Inquisition, and it was not a good thing, as you might imagine. Now on the top there are the cross, the crown of thorns, and the column left by these angels without wings, that symbol of the Passion of Christ. And basically there are some 300 figures that can be recognized in the chapel alone. Many of them were, about 100 of them be recognized by contemporaries, but many of them, they think they're 2 or 3 different people, so it's not very clear. And here on the right, there are people even kissing and holding, because of course these are going to the heavens. They are the souls that are found in heaven. And in the middle here, the 7 deadly sins. A man pulled down by a bag of coins, greed, and the keys, the stuff. And then a man with the first in his mouth, gluttony. A man pulled down by his testicles. So that's lust, as you could see. And down here, the gate of hell, behind Minos, the gate of hell, and that in this Michelangelo is a genius. He doesn't show us hell. He shows us the idea of hell. We know that hell is down there. We cannot see it. And basically, the genius thing is that it's even more scary. It's like in those horror movies when you can hear the music and there's a shade and you don't really know what's going on. It's even more terrifying than seeing the whole thing. And so the only thought of the hell should be enough to scare us off for the rest of our life and then behave. The so-called timor di Dio, the people who are afraid of God, they behave so they don't incur in God's punishment. Now, I have a couple of more things before we finish, and then I open up the microphones. Actually, I can do it now. And so people, if you want to ask a question or comment or do anything, you can just unmute yourself and then talk. Only mute yourself if you're talking, and then please move back in case there's a cat or dog or people moving furniture or any other noise in the background. And television, radio, people on phone call. I have every sort of experience here. And because we are a lot tonight. And people ask me, Michelangelo did the Sistine Chapel, all the greatest masters of the Renaissance, Ghirlandaio, Perugino, Pinturicchio, and so on, Botticelli. Why is not Raphael? Well, Raphael, it was supposed to be there. It would be there if they just hung out his tapestries. You can see in these pictures, these were a set of tapestries which are still in the Vatican. They are in the Pinacoteca, in the painting gallery, in the clear glass. And the cartoons were provided by Raphael. The original drawing are in London in the Victoria and Albert Museum. And the series only hangs like every 10 or 15 years. They did February this year because it was the 500 years anniversary of the since the death of Raphael. They were made at the beginning of 1500s, and they were used just as a extra decoration with the Acts of the Apostles, so the life of the apostles, and also the tapestries is a thick cotton and silk based thick rug, so it protects also. It keeps the warmer and the heating in, so it was used also for that reason, apart from being beautiful. And then this is when the Sistine Chapel, of course, the Sistine Chapel was used for the conclave, the election of the Pope, still is, but only since 1980s is the preferred or the exclusive place when this takes place. And popes have been elected also in other parts of Rome, in other parts of Italy, so there have been elections of Pope all over in the centuries. And today, so this is with the tapestries again. And this one is one of my favorite stories. This is the Cantoria, which is basically this one here, from which the singers are, because of course the Catholic Mass is sung all the way along, you know. And then they had the choir here. In the late 1400s, early 1500s, the greatest musician of the time, Josquin de Près, is a Frenchman, was director of the Sistine Chapel, master of the chapel for 2 years. There's still a choir of the Sistine Chapel. And they also have a children's boys choir. He left the graffiti inside the Cantoria, which was only discovered now in the last restorations. And this is from inside. And you could see is just kind of his name. And he left it like a graffiti. If you do that today, you go to jail in Italy because, of course, it's a crime. But back in times, you know, many artists make graffiti, left their signature in there. And then one thing that if you know someone in the Vatican, you might be lucky enough to get there, because it's not open for tours, but you know, if you know someone who works in there, they'll take you. On the right door is the one from which the people enters if you come from the museums. Then this one is the door to the sacristy. Now, when the Pope is elected, the chapel also, they have services. The Pope uses it for meetings. Every now and then they close it for a couple of hours to have services or papal meetings. There is this room here. It's a set of 5 rooms, actually, where there's the changing room, the sacristy, when Pope get dressed. And they make 3 different sets of outfits for the Pope when there's the election of the Pope. Because, of course, if the cardinals are inspired by God, then they know already who's going to be Pope. But the tailors are not. So they need to prepare 3 different sizes of outfits, so the newly elected Pope can find his own match. So far, I think only one Pope struggled with the size was John 23rd, because it was quite podgy. I mean, he was a big guy and he kind of was a bit tight. And there's some frescoes dating back to the 1400s, but it's only patches. And then this is also when they keep the chimney and the coloring for the smoke. The chimney is only temporary. There isn't a chimney usually there, which is something everybody asks about. I think they should put one permanently, because people want to see that. It's one of the few things that everybody knows, that, you know, when they elect the Pope, they have the white smoke or the black smoke if no Pope, or white Pope smoke if there's Pope. They used to make it with white hay, but now they use this chemicals. And everything is chemicals nowadays. And then this is the door that leads to the Basilica of St. Peter. And they put it here and then goes out through the window. And then you can see it from the square. Basically, we use Google. I haven't used Google today much. If you go, if you go from here, it's usually out here, comes out of here. This is the Sistine Chapel as seen from the square. Sorry, zoom too much. Oh, too far. I'm messing with Google now. Okay. Anyway, it's just on the roof then. Google has died. So it goes out through here and you can see from this. Where is it? No, Google. Google is not doing very well lately. I don't know. Too many people online. Grazie mille, grazie. Thank you. And then just a couple of minutes and then we switch to the question time. And no, we finished. Just before you go, of course, this tour is completely free. You will receive a link also if you want to tip. I mean, they're welcome. I don't feel that you have to. But one thing I'll appreciate you to do, if you come back on our website, I do offer also paid talks and paid tours. This one is completely free. The video will be free online if you want to watch. Just share with your friends. And we're doing now gift cards, so you can also gift virtual tours, either private virtual tours. private virtual tours or group virtual tours, they start at 12 euros per person, so per group, actually, per connection. So they're quite. Giovanni will put the link in the chat and on WhatsApp and everywhere, and also we'll email you, and of course you can unsubscribe anytime. Now, if there are any question, also there's a questionnaire I'd like you to do about the tours. What do you think about them? I really appreciate that. Now, I have a Christmas song at the end after we finish. So if you do have any question, I would like to take them. You can also interact with the audio. I also will take in questions from Facebook, if there are. So let's, do you have any questions? Anyone with a question? There is a question by Andrew and Lisa a while ago about, can you give the title of this book? The book is Me and Michelangelo by Gianluigi Colalucci, which I have somewhere. And you can find the book on the bookshop of the Vatican Museum. Sorry, I just found it. It's published by the Vatican Museums. You can find it on the bookshop of the Vatican Museum, vatican.va or vaticanmuseum.va. Is this one here? Io e Michelangelo, Me and Michelangelo, Gianluigi Colalucci. You can take a screenshot. It's published by the Vatican. And it's a book about how Colalucci basically, I love this because it's his personal experience working for some 20 years on the ceiling of the chapel, and his experience of being in so close contact of the fresco. In an interview, he said, I would have slept in there. I would have never left the chapel anymore. And he said, I miss the chapel. He's still living, he's in his 80s, I think, and he's still teaching, and he does beautiful. For me, hearing him is like eye-opening thing. I mean, I of course study history of art, and I'm qualified tour guide and all that. But listening to someone who spent so much time close to Michelangelo and actually clean the very surface of the Sistine Chapel, it's really eye-opening. It's really changed your perspective. You think of it in a very different way. Thank you for Belgium. Yes, we love Belgium, and grazie mille, Mario. Thank you. Any questions? Anyone want to say something? Also, you can also interact with the video, the audio. And let me just see more questions from the Panagiotis. I guess he's a Greek man. Did Michelangelo get inspiration from his form from the pediments of ancient temples? Yes, of course. Ancient art. They didn't know many pediments of ancient temples because this is before, especially materials from Greece and became available later on in Europe. It's more 17th, 18th century. But the Roman art definitely, especially sarcophaguses and tombstones, mostly sarcophagus. That's where he definitely did. The Borgia Pope contribute in any way to the church? Borgias will require an entire story. But anyway, the Borgias used the church as a personal tool of power. In fact, the Italian philosopher Machiavelli, who had this idea of being like, he was the creator of realpolitik. He believed the politicians should be above everything and should only have the unique task, the idea of achieving whatever was necessary. It's the reason of state. It's like the kind of, in the spy movies, spy stories, is the thing, for your country you do anything. There's no law, no rule. Just you achieve anything for your country. That was actually, the practice of that was originated in Renaissance Italy, and the Borgias were pretty much, especially the son of the Pope, Cesare Borgia, was a military leader. He tried to create a state within the Italian kingdoms that was independent from Spain or France. Sandeep does. That's the Borgia, the creators' creations in the church. Yes, the Borgias also were patrons of arts, with Pinturicchio, Frescos being made there. And then, did you hold tours in Rome in the Vatican? Yes, so the Grand Tour, what we actually do I do personally, but I own this small company, the Grand Tour. For 20 years, we've been giving tours. So I'm a qualified tour guide and a licensed guide also for the Vatican City. The Vatican Museum, you need the specific license for the Vatican City accreditation now. So we do mostly real person tour, like, classical tours, mostly cultural tours, and made in the same way. So they're not like very touristy tours. They're more for people who have more time and want to enjoy more and understand more, and also get the tools. The thing I love is that after you've done a tour, you're able to explain the things to other people. That's our goal, to make you, really know what we really the full experience of arts and culture. And doing that since 2002, of course, in March, all our business vaporized within 2 weeks. We lost everything, and we, that was the time to go virtual. And virtual has been really success, featured in the media. We had a lot of interviews, been growing, going really well, but looking forward to do real tours, do small group tours, family tours, private tours, and looking forward to do that soon, as soon maybe as April, March, we're not sure yet. But now it's in lockdown, so we have to wait for the protocols and the vaccination. But this summer we have operated, we have had tours, June, July, August. There have been not much, but something. Even at the Vatican. I have the last tour just a week before the Vatican closed in October. One of the guides which work with me sent me a picture, Valentina, with the mask, and the clients with the mask. The Vatican gallery completely empty, which is kind of heartbreaking. But on the other side, they enjoyed having all the space for herself. Again, the question about uncovering nudity. Why Colalucci decided to leave so many figures? That's a very good question. So and this is by Dominique, I can't read all the name. Yes, so that question has been asked many times. The thing is, what they say in the report of the restoration, I have read the memorials. I haven't read the full report, the documentation, because it's thousands of pages. Anyway, what they said is that many of these covers of the nudity, they were historical. And when I worked for about 10 years in the Sovrintendenza, in the government office that take care of the monuments. I work at the Pantheon, giving tours, helping, and doing the number of also administrative activities. And there was one day, there was a discussion because the director and was talking to the priest, and the priest said, well, but we need to clean this, there are pigeons here. And then if the director of the museum sees that the pig poo, the pigeon poo over there, because it's been there for 50 years, now the thing is historical, they will restore it and preserve it, because of course it's been there for so long. So a similar idea was with the nudity covered, because they thought that it's been there for so long, because they were made 1560s, so about 30 years, 20 years after the fresco was done, so very recent. The fresco was only complete on full nude for about 20 years, that they thought that it would have not been worth in the endeavor of uncovering that. Plus, some parts it's true that the original layer underneath was missing. And so I think there was a compromise. They were already under a lot of pressure for changing the colors and the scheme, that they didn't even want people like conservative Catholic or people that were thinking that nudity was not right there. Because in the ceiling, unless you look, you don't see it. But there on the wall, you see there St. Peter, on the full nude, something that people not expect. And some people, especially, some people that come from certain backgrounds, they really... they find it that quite shocking. I've seen it, people being uncomfortable with nudity, and I'm okay with it, of course, but I can understand the reason for that. And whatever, I think when you work on that scale, on something that important, that historical, with so many people involved, so millions and millions of people, billions in the world are aware of the fresco, and they would judge you and think about that. I think you have to compromise, and I think that they've done a decent compromise in the fresco. They could have taken maybe a few more off. There, I don't remember the exact number how many there are. I think there are about 45 or 50 bits that have been covered. So they're not hundreds. They're just 40 or 50. I think they took away 10 or 12, something like that. And let me see any more questions. Grazie. Thank you very much. Thank you. Do the feedback thing, please. How do we tip? Oh, thank you, Sandeep. Yes, there is tipping page. I will give that to you. This is our website. It will arrive by email today or tomorrow. I think I have it here. And then please, if you go on our web homepage, thegrantoureurope.com, you see there's a number of talks that I run every weekend, not over Christmas, but after Christmas in January, about many other topics, mostly about Renaissance, Baroque art, modern art, ancient Rome. So that's for the tip. Thank you. And that's I'll also open up. I go on the homepage. Gift cards are great. They start for 24 euros, and you can, send them to someone and they come very nicely with the ribbon and everything, and very easy to use. This is the reviews. So tomorrow at 9 Rome time, which is 3 p.m. in the East Coast in America, 12 on the Pacific, and 8 in England, and accordingly in every other part of the world. We have people from all over. I see there's a lot of people from Eastern Europe as well tonight. I'm really glad, and from Greece and Hella, and then there are even from Australia. So this is really the thing I love about tourism is you meet so many people from all over the world, and then here you have the Royal Palace of Caserta, which is in the outskirts of Naples, was built in the 18th century, and it's amazing. So we'll see the story about that tomorrow. And then there are more about Caravaggio, Leonardo, Michelangelo. So I'll be talking, some of them are biography of one artist with maybe 10, 12 masterpieces along. And they're about an hour now, 15 days talks. And then also about Pompeii, 24th of January, and so on. And I plan on keep doing them because I think even after the pandemic, it's a good way to learn live about a tour. Of course, there are documentaries, which are great. I love the documentaries by the BBC and many others. But the fact that you have someone you can ask and interact, I really like that. Usually on today, there's really a lot of people, but usually there's less people, and we can enjoy the thank you. Istanbul, beautiful. I've never been. That's on my traveling list. I got a list of places I want to see. Constantinople is probably in the first 3 on the list. Istanbul, beautiful. My family, my dad grew up in Turkey for years, and it's there. Okay, so thank you, everyone. Now I'm going to play some music. I don't know if there's any more questions or someone. Thank you from Northern Ireland. Oh, wonderful. Beautiful. I've been to Dublin last year. Love it. Maybe you should improve the weather a little bit. That was the only downside, but everything, the people, the city is amazing. There's actually, I give a talk about the Caravaggio in Dublin. In the National Gallery of Ireland, there is the Caravaggio, which was discovered about 20 years ago in the 90s. And the Jesuits, just not far from the museum, they had this Caravaggio there, and then it's one of the masterpieces that I really enjoyed. Okay, let's put some music on. If they have North Carolina, beautiful. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Virginia. Thank you, thank you. Yeah, so at the beginning of January, we do a tour of the Medici collections. And so they will be including like the history of the Uffizi and all that. So you can check on the website and also send us an email, and there'll be more information on that. So let's put some music on. Now, this year they did a kind of a concert at the Vatican. They have a big concert with big stars every year. This year, of course, they couldn't do one. They had like one man on a piano. But last year, Christmas concert at the Vatican in the Paolo VI, it was really, really beautiful. Oh, South Wales. And thank you, everyone. Thank you. No bitch in California nudist. Yeah, I know. Well, I've been in California. Yeah, I'm just kidding. I don't know. Maybe Washington State. Somewhere. No, but in France, there's a lot of nudist beaches. In Italy, it's kind of difficult because it depends where you go. Okay, so I don't know how from the Sistine Chapel we ended up on the nudist beach topic. So this is the concert at the Vatican last year. 2019, because this year they couldn't do it, and with Pope Francis and with a number of stars, and you recognize some of them, and they're both American and international stars and Italian musicians. They had this Andrea Grimminelli, which is a flautist, which plays with Bocelli, is one of the superstar flautists. And then I'll play this music, and then we'll say goodbye. I just like it, and it's just happy. Lionel Richie there. Okay, Merry Christmas, ciao, buon Natale, good night, bye bye, thank you.